Hello, everybody. I'm so glad to see you here. Wednesday, it's a continuation of the Local Heroes Month here on All Access Live. Before I get started, I want to thank a couple of heroes that I have, sponsors that have been with my show for a while now. They are locally based. So, first, we've got Rhythm Traders, the greatest drum shop this side of the Mississippi. They've got repairs, they've got lessons. So, if you want to get all your gear repaired, go into rhythmtraders.com. Let them know I sent you. You're going to get 10% off everything you see there. So they got a killer collection of gear. They've got instructors that will undoubtedly make you a rock star and want to hire my next guest. The greatest greatest guitar shop on the planet, Five Star Guitars, has been a sponsor of this show for a long time. Since they're based in Oregon, there's no sales tax. So if you're ordering outside of Oregon, go to the link below, fivestarguitars.com/allaccesslive. Enter the promo code of AllAccess15. You're going to have a series of pages where you can save 15% on top of the fact that there's no sales tax. So you're going to be supporting local. They've been nominated, or I guess they've been dubbed the greatest merchant in music gear in North America, I think, for 2 years running now from the NAMM Association. So let Joff Metz, the owner of Five Star Guitars, know that I sent you, and he'll probably hook you up with the best instructor in the house. So you can get instructors like Jennifer Batten and other pros. So Rhythm Traders, Five Star Guitars, thank you guys so much for your help. Now, if you're watching this show on anything else other than YouTube, I would love it if you go to the link below, youtube.com/allaccesslive with Kevin Rankin. If you do, make sure that you hit the subscribe link down at the bottom, hit the bell, and you'll be notified about all my upcoming guests. I've got some good ones. Next week, I've got Portland Cello Project with a couple of members that have been touring, doing a tribute to Prince with some of Prince's bandmates. Doug Jenkins and Skip Von Kusky are local heroes, and so I'm looking forward to having them. And we also have Rob Boynia and Mark Powers from Floater, who I'm sure my next guest has worked with in the past. So youtube.com/allaccesslive with Kevin Rankin. You can go back and look at 240 some odd other episodes with great guests, and you'll be notified about the good ones that I have coming up. So now check this out. Today, this gentleman has been a Renaissance man in certain ways. He started off with a record label. We're going to talk about all the different processes that he went through. He's at a record label. He's got a PR and publicity business. He's worked with bands that I've worked with, and I'm really excited to talk to him about that. So let's get started with the man with all the crazy stories. I've got Alex Steininger from In Music We Trust. Hey, Alex, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing well, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad to hear you here. I think I already fumbled some of the gigs that you've had and the order in which they came, but
It's all right. I started out writing, and then from there I started the online magazine, and then PR, and then the record label.
Okay.
And then management after that.
I guess that's the proper way to go. You don't want to start a record label unless you've actually had some dealings with understanding the ins and outs of the business, right?
That was my plan, and I actually did. I managed Floater for a bit, so I have worked with them.
Really? Okay, right on.
Yeah.
You know, man, it was a drag. I was on tour a month or so ago when Pete unfortunately passed away. Their drummer, Mark, who's been playing drums with the band for a while, is again another Renaissance man, and he and Rob both have this incredible podcast. Have you heard of their Igniter podcast?
No, I have not. I should hit up Rob about that.
You should. It's fascinating. It's all about igniting creativity and where you find inspiration. So.
Nice.
They'll talk about it, but go check out Igniter Podcast, folks, if you're watching. So now I'm trying to think back about when you and I first got to know each other. If I remember correctly, when In Music We Trust first sort of became a household name in the Portland area, I had just left the band On a Llama. But had you worked with a local organization doing some writing at that point? Was it one of the local rags before your mag?
Before that, I was writing for AOL.
Oh, okay.
I was reviewing bands for an AOL forum called ChipNet.
Okay.
And when that ceased, I was still getting a bunch of free promo CDs, and I didn't know what to do, but I wanted to write about them. So my friend Ryan O'Neill, he was a web programmer. He's like, let's start a web page. And I was like, what's a web page?
Right. That must have been mid-90s, right?
All right, that would have been 97.
Okay.
AOL didn't have access to the World Wide Web yet.
Okay.
You needed like a local ISP, like Teleport.
Right. Yeah.
Uh,
The vanity domains weren't really a big thing at that point.
exactly. It was all about AOL or Prodigy or news groups for the most part.
Right.
And then this World Wide Web was coming along, and for the first, I think, month or month and a half, I didn't even have access to my own online magazine.
Okay.
And then about, I don't know, 4 to 6 weeks in, AOL launched their own web browser, and I could actually view it. And I was like, oh, this is cool.
With dial-up, right?
With dial-up, yeah, with dial-up. I still have that dial-up number. I still have a landline. It's still my office number. So I've had that number since 95.
Wow, that's a crazy thing. When you run into people at venues and they say, "Yeah, man, I try to get a hold of you, and your number must have changed," that's not the truth. Your number's been the same for a long.
It has. That number, the Music Trust number, has never changed.
That's a beautiful thing. You
I mean, for a long time there, I didn't get. It was just a landline, so I didn't get texts, and people would just text all the time and be like, "Yo, I've been texting you." I'm like, "Nah, man, I didn't get any text from you."
Yeah.
And they'd be like, "Oh no, I'm texting this other number." I'm like, "Oh, that's a landline." And people are like, "What?"
Right.
And that was like, like late 2000s, before the 2010s hit. But then, of course, I quit with the phone company and got a VoIP. So I get text on the landline now too.
Okay. Nice. That the writing part of things. What got you interested in writing about bands? Are you a musician?
No, I mean, I've always wanted to be one. I play, really little guitar, not even enough to play in like a shitty punk band.
Oh,
Uh,
it's three
but
chords. That's all you need, man.
yeah. But what got me started was, well, I had an AOL account, and it was back when it was, like $10 a month for 3 hours, and then 10 cents a minute over 3 hours. And I was working at fast food, paying for AOL,
Oh my god.
and or my parents were paying for it. One of the two or both. And it just was really, really expensive. And I read this listing that you could get a free AOL account, unlimited minutes, free AOL account if you wrote for this magazine. So I was like, yeah, I can do that. But they were an electronics magazine, and they wanted a video game reviewer. So I was like, I'll do that. I play video games.
Yeah.
So I started out as a video game reviewer, but my video game reviews, thank goodness they're not available on the internet anymore because ChipNet's long gone. You can't even search it. But my video games were like, this game is fun. I like it. I don't like this game. It's not fun.
You know what? There was a columnist that actually used to write about music that was kind of like that, and in a pretty popular magazine too, a local music rag. And I remember thinking, there's never anything about the substance of the music. It's all, those guys really had a beautiful aesthetic. I loved the costumes they had. I thought, okay, either that's the diplomatic way of not wanting to say something bad, or the
Yeah,
dude just doesn't get it, right? But
exactly. But so I started writing about video games, and I wasn't very good at it. And I went to the editor, and I'm like, we're an electronics magazine. You play music on electronics. Can I review music now? And he was like, yeah. So I started writing labels and faxing them. And the few that had email addresses, I'd email them, I'd call, and I started getting promo CDs. I mean, 2 records that I got like months before they were out was Filter's Short Bus and Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill.
wow,
And so when they hit, and then they hit big on the radio, I was like, oh, I've had that album for like 4 months.
right?
Like, this is rad. I'm in high school, and like I have these albums, these kids don't have, and like I'm hip to these things that are coming to break. And so I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna write about music. So I started writing about music for ChipNet. I probably wrote for a year and a half about music for them. And then they started branching out. They started having a food section and a travel section. And the editor just was like, I'm going to make this like a one-stop everything magazine.
Okay.
And AOL was like, no, you're an electronics magazine. You cover anything electronics, nothing else. And so AOL terminated their contract with him. I lost my free account.
Oh no.
But I was still getting promo CDs. And I'm like, what am I going to do? That's when my friend Ryan O'Neill came in and was like, let's start our own magazine on the web. And we did. And from there, it started to snowball and take off. And within like 6 months of reviewing music on the World Wide Web, Billboard reviewed us.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I still have that Billboard review somewhere. and they talked about how we championed the little guys. We weren't interviewing mega acts like Korn, but we were championing the little guys, indie bands, and local bands to our areas, and that made me feel good.
Yeah.
And then also through writing, I was able to meet these bands that I was aware of or didn't know much about, and just kind of really immerse myself in the Portland scene and kind of made it my life.
Yeah, you've become a household staple. It's really the cool thing was it from that era on. There were very few nights you could go out and hit a myriad of clubs and not run into you. It's one thing for somebody to sit at home and feel like they can write about a band and their impact on the scene without actually seeing those bands out there every night. So did you develop the hustle early on? Because you got that networking thing really, really well down.
Absolutely. I'd go out every night. There would always be a show in Portland. I could go to La Luna, Stage 4, the O, Roseland. I could find a show every night to go to, and I would just go okay, the Rocket is writing about this band. I'm gonna go check them out. At the time, John Chandler was my favorite writer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about that, about some inspiration in artists and writers that did music that really kind of lit a fire under you.
I mean, I really loved John Chandler, Marty Hughley, Scott Lewis, Don Campbell. I mean, the Oregonian, when the A&E section actually covered music, when we had an A&E section, I don't know if the Oregonian even has an A&E section anymore, but the Oregonian, the Rocket, and Willamette Week were kind of my just go-tos.
Sure.
I picked those up. And then, of course, Anodyne, and then you had Two Louis.
Right.
I would pick all those up and read them cover to cover.
Okay. What were the bands that were really popping at that time that you remember picking up and thinking, okay, these are the next big things. I want to see what the vibe is about this band that's popping right now.
Well, I came in a weird time. So I started writing for ChipNet in '95, and then started a Music Trust in '97.
Okay.
So there was this kid in my high school that was lived down the street from my friend Chad, and he would expose us to bands. He turned us on to Cracker Bash. He turned us on to Hazel. He turned us on to Everclear before they were on the radio, and turned us on to a lot of local bands that I just thought were amazing. And then of course I'd read the Rocket, Pond, Skip Loader. Those are bands I just really, really loved.
Right.
And I loved them more than these big radio bands that I was listening to at the time. So at the time when I started writing, I mean, you had Everclear, Pond, and Skip Loader all signed to major labels. After I'd been writing in Music Trust for about a year, that's when 44 Long's second record came out.
The Hangover Heights?
No, that was the third one that I put out. But Collect 'Em All came out, and I reviewed that. And I had went back and listened to the Schizophonic release, his first one. And I loved it. And Greil Marcus from Rolling Stone was raving about 44 Long. And so when I got Collect 'Em All on Sideburn Records, the offshoot Burnside Records,
right.
I was like, this guy is phenomenal. I gave it this rave review, and all of a sudden I get this phone call from Brian Berg.
Oh, man.
And he's like, hey, you want to meet up? And I'm like, yeah, let's meet up. And he's like, you wrote one of my favorite reviews of my record. Thank you. And then I met him, and he's like, oh, shit, you're young.
This young kid.
Yeah, and he's like, my record isn't really like a kid's record. How did you connect with it? How did you get it? I mean, since I was 14, my favorite band's been The Replacements. I've always been kind of lyrical first.
Sure.
Which has, led me to Bob Dylan and Bruce Springsteen and Tom Petty.
Sure.
But lyrically is kind of where I always focused. And kind of, I mean, high school, Bad Acne, Handful of Friends, Not Popular, Girls Ignored Me.
Sure.
Really kind of just submerged myself in the music. And so love melodies, I love voices, whatever, love hooks, but it was really lyrics what turned me on and really had me connect with music. So I told Brian Berg, I'm like, your lyrics, I connected with your lyrics first, and then I get into the rest of the music.
Yeah.
So at the time, what I was going back to, I came in this weird time where Cracker Bash was done. Sean Crogan's one of my favorite. Heat Miser was kind of on their way out. Um, even though I saw Heat Miser live at La Luna, but then you had like Pond and Skip Loader and Everclear really coming up. I mean, I thought they were all going to be huge. They signed to major labels. They were going to be massive.
Right. At that point, it really mattered.
Absolutely. And, Marty Hughley was raving about them. The major label bands got like tons of coverage in the Oregonian, which was great. I mean, I bought the Skip Loader record down at Ozone Records off of Marty Hughley's review in the A&E.
I bought a lot of stuff off Marty's recommendations as well. Yeah, guy knew what he was talking about for sure.
Absolutely. And I'm pretty sure I bought Pond after a review in the Rocket. But those were the bands. I mean, Sean Crogan, Pete Krebs, Elliott Smith still like reigned supreme and was like dawning this new era where Portland was no longer like considered, in competition with Seattle. It was kind of its own thing and really burgeoning.
Yeah.
And then we had a lot of other promising bands that seemed to be taking off and touring nationally and doing stuff. I mean, you had Eyes on Floater, national, major labels were looking at Floater. Then, a couple of years later, Cherry Pop and Daddies exploded, and that happened. I mean, there was a lot going on there. There was like a lot of bands. I thought King Black Acid was going to blow up. Helio Sequence seemed to do really well and start blowing up. Yeah.
Dandies kind of came right through that phase as well.
They did too. Absolutely.
You know what? There's no way I can't at least point out how fun and adorable your dog is right now. Having so much fun back there.
Thank you.
Yeah, so there are folks that chime in every once in a while on the chat, and Carrie actually is mentioning Carrie Bonner-Roosh has mentioned Rubberneck, Dan Reed Network. Dan Reed Network at that point was kind of on the outs, right? I mean, they kind of wrapped things up. I moved here in '94 into Portland, and I was a huge Dan Reed Network fan, but unfortunately, they had just kind of met their demise. But yeah, for sure, Rubberneck was another one that was great. Jolly Mon, I think, was kind of popping, and then at that point, and
I did press for Jolly Mon.
Okay, yep. I had a feeling that band was going to be big as well because they had.
I thought so too.
The songs and there was a visual, there's an aesthetic that was unique and sort of a brand, right? So
absolutely.
Having traveled a lot, when I travel now and people say, "Oh, you're from Portland," you must know that like it's really cool that bands like the Shins and the Decemberists have put that city on the map. I'm thinking,
absolutely.
Well, they have, in a way, for modern times, right, in the Portlandia sort of era. But Portland has been a hotbed for incredible bands for a long time, and it's sleepy in some ways. That it's like the industry's best kept secret. That while Seattle put out a lot of really successful big like grunge bands and rock bands, metal bands, Portland has, I felt like, been a pioneer in the indie music scene,
Yeah, I mean, we always had a lot of good indie pop, indie folk, a lot of indie-centric bands that did well nationally, but maybe never got radio play, but did well and had a name for themselves. Absolutely.
Who's the band that you can think of right off the top of your head that had every element that should have been huge that just didn't break?
Wow, that's a really good question. Floater. I mean,
Yeah.
they should have been they were selling out La Luna. Originally they were opening for Jolly Mon, opening for Cherry Pop and Daddies, then all of a sudden they're headlining themselves. And in high school, everyone I knew just absolutely loved Floater.
Yeah.
Truth be told, I started going to Floater concerts just because the girls I had crushes on were going to Floater concerts.
Right.
And they all like loved Rob.
Yeah.
And so I'd go just like see them, and maybe they'd see me at a show and be like, "Oh, he's cool." Never happened that way, but it's what I did.
Right.
I always thought they should have been way bigger than they were.
Julie Jockum says hello in the chat here, by the way.
Hey.
That's a great pick. You will probably be in agreement with me that when you're out and you find somebody, say, and you're in the UK or something, that is a huge fan of a band that you knew of in the local area that maybe didn't get that big, and you kind of feel like, well, that was my little secret, right? That's the band that I had, sort of cornered as our special thing. Floater, I was in Pittsburgh playing a show like 3 months ago. I had my Floater beanie on as I loaded in for sound check, and the production manager came up and he said, "That's not Floater from Eugene, Oregon." I said, "Yeah, how do you know those guys?" And he said, "Dude, that is my favorite band. I went to U of O for 2 years and I moved out here to work in the music industry in Pittsburgh." And he said, everything, I have bootlegs, man, and we trade. I have there's a Floater a community where we trade this stuff." And it turned out that we knew a ton of mutual friends, but it is like the sort of familial thing that it's nice to share, right? But
Absolutely. And the other band I really, really think, and I thought was going to take off, that kind of, they ascended past, in some ways, Floater's level, where they actually signed that major label deal. But then, A&R guys get fired, new A&R guys come in, label shifts, all that. But Pond, they put 2 records out on Sub Pop, they signed to Sony,
right.
and Rock Collection is being re-released in April on vinyl, which I'm really excited about.
Really?
But I was Pond, yeah. I thought Pond, and they're doing 2 shows. They're doing a Mississippi Studio show in Portland, and they're going to do Tractor Tavern in Seattle, April 14th and 15th, or 15th and 16th, one of the two. I'm planning to go to both. But I thought Pond should have really taken off and been huge. And I mean, as a 15-year-old kid in '95, when Everclear Pond and when Everclear Pond and Skip Loader all had major label releases come out, I mean, I thought out of 3, Pond was going to be the big band. They were going to be huge and take off. I thought Skip Loader would have moderate success and do well. And then I don't know why. I thought Everclear. I still think Sparkle and Fade. I'll get teased or made fun of, but I still think Sparkle and Fade's a strong record. But I never thought it would take off like it did. Sure. I thought Skip Loader and Pond would be bigger. And so look what I know.
Well, it's cool that you have an ear though for those hooks. It's great that you were a lyrical guy, because admittedly, man, lyrics were so secondary to me until the last couple of years. And that's why bands even artists like Springsteen and Dylan, I didn't get it until later on. I had to see Springsteen live almost 10 years ago for me to recognize his brilliance, But now I get it, and I'm listening to lyrics a lot more, and it changes my whole perspective on bands. Tales Untold was a band locally that I couldn't believe didn't get bigger, because I thought they had an image. I loved their Brit pop style, but lyrically, I thought they were fantastic. I mean, if you go lyrics in town, the cerebral part of the writing, like Here Comes Everybody, it's amazing that, their music is very eclectic. They kind of have a Roxy Music, Talking Heads sort of influence, but lyrically, they're poets. It's kind of cool to see. But Elliott Smith,
Michael Jarmer. Sorry to cut you off there. Michael Jarmer from Here Comes Everybody was my high school English teacher.
I hear that all the time. It's nuts. At Rex Putnam?
Yep.
Yes, man. Oh, that's Julie, of course. Tales Untold is her fave. Tales Untold really met their end in '95, I think. And so you would have been 15, I think, at that point.
Yeah.
Their stuff resurfaced a couple of years ago, out SoundCloud. I think, you can get it on Apple Music and Spotify now. But they were on the cusp. Clark Stiles was in that band, and he's done a lot of major production for big artists. But yeah, it's one of those bands that you think they've got it all, and for some reason it doesn't take off. So, folks, if you're watching this from anywhere else in the world and you want to have the inside scoop on what started Portland's indie scene, go back and find bands like Tales Untold, Skip Loader, Heat Miser, Elliott Smith's first project, right, or project that sort of launched him into his solo career. And so from the writing then, and you started your In Music We Trust, you started your web online zine, and that was kind of a thing, right? It was long before blogs ever really became a thing. And
absolutely,
you were doing reviews, and I remember reading so many articles that you guys had done, and I'm glad you brought up Scott Lewis. Scott, to me, when he worked at the Rocket, was one of my favorite writers, and S.P. Clark too. Two Louis.
S.P. Clark, great, yeah. Two Louis, yes, absolutely.
There was so much substance in what they saw in the music that would introduce a new audience to that music that there's no way any A&R guy was going to do for a band. When you saw bands out there that you felt like they were worth that promotion, what was the sort of What was the fire that lit underneath you that you thought, okay, I can help this band get to the next level?
Well, so I mean, what started, I was reviewing all these bands that I really like, local bands, and then all of a sudden I was getting emails or letters in the mail. Because I had my address on the website where people would just be like, hey, can I send you my band? I started getting bands from all over the U.S., cassettes, CDs, a lot of, back then, still demo cassettes I would get from these bands. And I would listen to them and be like, oh, this band's like awesome. They're from Pennsylvania. I don't know what I can do for them other than, write about them, but I really dig them. But I would write about bands. And then at one point I was like, I want to do more for these bands. Like, what can I do? And publicists were calling me and pitching me bands because we had grown in Music We Trust and we got reviewed in Billboard. And there's this whole weird in Music We Trust buyout thing that happened with this company in Carlsbad, California, that then didn't go through, luckily. We used to have a full page ad in Tower Records Pulse magazine for like 1 or 2 issues.
Wow.
Because this company on Carlsbad was buying us. And then, because back then content was king. You just needed content. If you had a website, you wanted content, lots of links, lots of pages.
Sure.
And they bought us. They were going to buy us out, and we were in the process of being bought out. They flew me to Carlsbad and everything. I had a meeting with them. And then the CEO embezzled a bunch of money, and the company was shut down by the IRS. At one point, I was told that in Music We Trust, the deal had gone through, and that in Music We Trust would be part of bankruptcy proceedings. And I was like, no, I didn't get any. How could a deal go through? I didn't get a dime. Like, you can't just take my baby.
Right. Right.
At that time, my partner, Ryan O'Neill, business partner, was still involved. Okay. I would say partner, but he'd always get mad and be like, business partner, dude, business partner. I'm like,
okay. Well, yeah.
But my business partner, Ryan O'Neill, him and I were like, this is us. Like, they can't take it away from us. And then I had a friend that worked at the company, and he's like, yeah, man, the paperwork never got filed. Don't worry, you are good. You're good.
Good.
So we got to keep in Music We Trust. But there's this point where we had ads in Tower Records, Pulse magazine, which I loved, and advertising our online magazine. And I'm like, oh, we're going to be huge. Like, we're going to be big. Stars in my eyes, thought I was going to be awesome. Sure. But when I went to that meeting, part of the deal was they were going to fund me to start a record label. So my next step was like, to help these bands, I got to start a record label. Like, how am I going to do that? How am I going to get the money to start it? And when I'm 18 years old, when this deal falls through, I'm like, well, I don't know where I'm going to get money to start a record label, but I'll find a way. And in the interim, all these publicists were pitching me, and I was like, wait, I could be a publicist. I could do this. So
can I stop you for just a quick sec?
Yeah.
You talked about the record label, and yes. People that watch this show, some people they're musicians. They want, they still have an idea that a record label is what they're looking for, and that's what they need in order to get any kind of recognition for their music. At that point, you're talking late 90s. I'm sorry. The internet hadn't really taken over in terms of streaming, of course. So what did a record label look like to you, an indie record label? You're seeing like artists or labels like Sub Pop being where you were kind of keeping the bar?
I mean, absolutely. But I mean, obviously Sub Pop had more money and more reach and, bigger distribution, employees, more time, more money, more power, even at their quote unquote indie, level, because they had done deals with majors. But, I mean, obviously 100% independently owned now. But because of the success of, Nirvana and stuff, they got influx of capital throughout the years.
Sure.
But for someone at my level, and I started doing publicity first. Okay. Had a publicist friend who guided me and trained me, actually 2 of them.
You want to give props to them?
Huh?
Do you want to give some props to them? Who are those?
Absolutely. It was Robin Mullins at Squirrely Girl PR, okay. And it was Barbara Mitchell with, what was her? I mean, I know her email address.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of her company, but Barbara was the first one, and she took me under her wing and really helped me. And then after that, Robin Mullins took me over, and she was great. All the men I talked to were like No, you're not gonna be my competition. Fuck you. No, I'm not gonna help you. I'm not gonna train you. I'm not gonna help give you any guidance. No.
You're a threat.
The two women took me under their wings and really helped me, and I'll be forever grateful to both of them and always just love them and be forever in their debt. And actually, coming up even after that, more women helped me than men, really, on that side. They just seem like, yeah, here, yeah, cool. Men were always like, why do you want that contact? Why do you want that contact? Like, I'm like, dude, I just think, can you give me this writer's information? Like, I know they're gonna dig my client.
Yeah.
Women always seem to be like way more helpful. But yeah, forever in debt to Robin Mullins and Barbara Mitchell, who took me under their wings. And so I started doing PR, and I was doing PR, and I ran into Mike Jones at N.A.I.L Distribution at a party.
Yeah.
One of Larry Crane's parties. And he's like, you know, what's your goals? What's your plans? You know, doesn't it suck to work from home? You need an office. And I was like, I'd love an office, but how can I afford one? Mike's like, I'll give you a free office in return for you coming to work for N.A.I.L.
Wow.
And so I went to work for N.A.I.L, and I became their marketing guy.
Really? Okay. What year was that?
That I went to him in '99.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. In early '99, I went there, and I worked there for 2.5 years.
Okay.
And then from N.A.I.L, I went to Burnside Distribution. And so while I was at N.A.I.L, though, is when I started the record label. And the record label was something I always had in the back of my mind that I wanted to do. I just didn't know how I was going to fund it. And I got in a car accident, and I got some settlement money.
Oh.
Yeah. So I was like, I'm going to start a record label. And the only person I wanted to work with at that time was Sean Crogan. I wanted to put out a Sean Crogan solo record. Like,
right.
I wanted Sean. I love Cracker Bash. I love Junior High. Junior High is another band I thought was going to be huge and take off. And I really wanted to put out a Sean Crogan solo record. And at the time I was interning for this guy named Eric Vetter. He had Orbit Travel. But he also had NV Management.
Okay.
His initials. And he was managing number 2, Neil Gus from Heat Miser's post Heat Miser band, Junior High, Richard Fontaine. He was managing these bands. He took me under his wing. So I worked for his travel agency and was working for his, interning for his management company. And like really wanted to work with Sean Crogan. So when I got some settlement money and decided I was going to finally start the record label, it was one night. It was Elliott Smith, Sean Crogan, and I at Colosso on Broadway, which is now Swift.
Okay.
And we were sitting there because we went to the the X-Ray Cafe reunion show. They were filming for a documentary, and Hazel played.
Okay.
And so we all went and saw Hazel, which was amazing.
That's interesting to see it there. I mean, X-Ray probably had capacity.
Oh, X-Ray was gone at the time. It was at what is now the Doug Fir. It was at the bottom of a Chinese restaurant right there.
Okay.
So it was the X-Ray reunion show that they filmed at the bottom of this Chinese restaurant that is now the Doug Fir in the basement. And then afterwards, Elliot and Sean wanted to go get drinks, but I was underage. So I convinced them to go to Colosso because I knew Colosso had a full bar. You could drink, but also minors could go in there.
Okay.
And Elliot was like, Sean, is that true? And Sean's like, yeah. So we went to Colosso. And I was at Colosso. I told Sean that I had some money and I could cut him a check the next day to record a solo record. And Elliot was like, yeah, you should do it.
Wow.
And Sean agreed to it. And then I called him the next day. I'm like, I'm holding you to this. Wrote him a check, and he went and recorded From Burnt Orange to Midnight Blue, which would become my first release on A Music We Trust.
Wow, that's a great first record. Good.
Absolutely. To this day, I still love it.
And then ploy them with a little alcohol to make sure that you can sweeten the deal. That's a smart idea. And to get Elliot's endorsement, right?
Yeah, I wasn't the one flying them with alcohol. I mean, I couldn't order it, so they were ordering their own. I was sitting there drinking lemonades.
Just waiting for them to just get ready, right? To just loosen inhibitions. And
Right?
Man, had you worked with Elliot at all at that point?
No, I mean, I never really got to work with Elliot. I interviewed him. I did merch for him at a couple shows, but that's about it. But no, I hadn't worked with him at that point. I only really knew him through Sean.
What was the interview like with Elliott Smith?
It was interesting because the whole backstory of that was he didn't like doing interviews. And so I kept getting rejected for interviews. And so one night Sean Crogan did a show, I think with Rebecca Gates from the Spinans and some other people, a Valentine's Day show at EJ's.
Okay.
And by this point, I was still underage, but I had a letter from the OLCC that would let me go into bars to see shows. I literally had to like be in there and in between sets, like go outside.
Right.
EJ's was nice enough; they'd let me go upstairs in the green room, so I didn't have to go outside when it was raining.
Sure.
And Portland rains all the time. But Elliot came to the show to support his friends, and we got talking, and I was just like, I would love to interview you. And he's like, I'd love for you to interview me. I'm like, really? Because I keep putting in requests and you keep rejecting them. And he's like, I don't reject them. My publicist does, but you put in a request tomorrow, you'll get the interview. So I called the next day. The PR firm he was working with, Girly Action, and I put in my request, and the publicist was like, yeah, dude, you went behind my back, huh? And I'm like,
ooh,
oh, I didn't go behind your back. Like, it's literally sitting there with Elliot, and it just came up. I don't know if I started it or he started it, but I was like, yeah, I'd love to interview you. And he said he'd get one. And he's like, yeah, I know. Elliot called. You'll get an interview.
Nice. Good.
And he was like, he hates interviews, so make it interesting. So then I was really scared. So I tried to find like the most interesting questions I could. No boilerplate ones, no generic ones. So I started talking about how his artwork in the albums related to the songs. And he was like, whoa, dude, like, I don't know. I trust N.A.I.L, Gus with some artwork, and I trust Autumn DeWild with some artwork, and my friends do artwork, and they turn it in, and I love it. I'm like, wow, some of these questions I've never even thought of, Alex. But then we talked a lot about his lyrics and stuff, and about how everyone thought he was just autobiographical all the time. Right. But he was like, no, I'm not autobiographical all the time. Sometimes, I write very universal stuff that, yeah, it might apply to me, but I'm not writing it about me. I'm writing about kind of the world at large. And so we talked a lot about that, how everyone thought he was sad and mopey when, he could be a happy guy and crack jokes and laugh. And everyone thought every song he wrote was about him. And he's like, it's not. So then we talked about how at the time, Figure 8 was maybe a bit more detached lyrically from him personally and more universally in scope. And he thought that was a good observation. But yeah, I tried to be as interesting as possible and just talked a lot about his lyrics and art.
One of my favorite things in interviews, and I would never consider myself an interviewer. I mean, I've certainly done a lot of them on the show, but for me, I love relationship building, with people. And I think that is a great way to approach it. If you find something that they're interested in, it undoubtedly becomes more of an interesting conversation for, one-on-one, because they like to talk about it and they're not sick of the questions that have been asked. I had Dolly Parton's sister on the show, who was an incredible woman, and she's got 40 albums of her own. She had a record label when she was 17, obviously from the musical family, but every single interview she's ever done has been everybody asking about Dolly. And I purposely didn't, right? And she's got a story of her own, and it was a fascinating story, and she was a delightful human being. And afterwards, she was telling me, I don't know if that was your intent, but that was the first interview of 10,000 I've ever done that nobody asked me about my sister. And it was kind of sad to me, right? That these people that have just worked their entire life to develop a career are always going to be in their sibling's shadow or their parents' shadow, unless you're, somebody that has just been able to extend that much farther. So for me, I love the idea that you saw, and maybe that was the prodding of his publicist, but I bet it influenced the way that you started doing other interviews with other guests.
I mean, also, yeah, absolutely. But also as a publicist, setting up interviews for my clients and having clients be like, oh, that interview sucked. This guy asked me these questions. That really shaped the way I would interview people. Or like, so I put out #2 second record, What Does Good Luck Bring? And all people wanted to talk to Neil Gust about was Elliott Smith and Heat Miser.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, my pug is wanting to come say hi. Do you mind if I bring him up here?
Not at all. Go for it.
Come on, up. Come on. This is Alex. Yeah, he's maybe just wanting more attention, but that's okay. He'll be here eventually. So yeah.
But go on. Sorry.
No, it's okay. But my question for you about the Elliot connection was that Elliot never publicly really, let people in very much into his life, right? It seemed like he was very private in a lot of ways after Heat Miser. Heat Miser people seem to know more about him and the collective, but then, from whatever happened in his life, you just stopped hearing more about the inner workings of him, and then rumors started, right? And maybe there was a mystery to it that he held back.
I think that comes with certain people and fame and accolades and just being uncomfortable and not knowing how to handle it. So you you pull away, and I mean, once Elliot got bigger and bigger, of course, everyone wanted to be his friend, and everyone wants to attach to a star. Right. So he was just being glommed onto by people. So I think not just him, but a lot of people would just revert back to your close-knit group of friends and kind of like keep that bubble going. So it's to not expose yourself to toxicity or people that are just using you.
Sure.
I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So we are another great writer and working in PR for sure. Larry Turing here has a question in the chat, or he mentioned sequestered for reviews by In Music We Trust over the years. Western Ariel is one he recalls. So yes, we both have lots and lots of time and experience with Joff Metz and Western Ariel. But how did you first get involved with those guys?
So it's a funny story. So Western Ariel had sent In Music We Trust their records a couple times to review, and I always ignored them. And then
for what reason?
I don't know. I just wasn't. I put them on. I wasn't vibing them. I don't know. I didn't connect with them. Sure. Lyrically, like I said, lyrically is where I would go first. And so even if a song was like really catchy, lyrics would have to hook me, and it'd have to relate to my life somehow.
Okay.
So I just didn't connect with Western Ariel. And then one day I was supposed to be on the list for a show at Ash Street, and I show up and they're like, "You're not on the list." And I'm like, whatever, I don't even want to really see this band. This band just been bugging me to come see him. I promised I would. I'm not on the list. Fuck it. So I went over to Dante's, and I'm sitting down at Dante's, and like across from me at the sidebar at Dante's was Joff. And he came up to me and he was like, "Hey man, are you Alex Steininger from Music Trust?" I'm like, "Yeah, I am." And he's like, "Oh, I'm Joff from Western Ariel." I'm like, "Oh, hey man, nice to meet you." And I was trying to be pleasant. And as I recall, he was kind of like, "Dude, don't shine me, man. You don't like my band. You don't cover my band." Okay, fair enough. I have not covered your band. You're right. And he's like, "We're working on a new record. I would love to float you to the new record. Will you give it a fair shake?" And I was like, "Absolutely." So we sat there and drank, and I'm like, "This guy's a cool guy."
Sure.
And so, I mean, as much as I keep repeating that I'm lyrically driven, that personal connection can be a game changer for anybody. And it definitely was a game changer to me. So I listened to the new record that he gave me, and You Can't Turn a Whore into a Housewife. I was like, holy shit. Lyrically, the song was just brilliant.
Yep.
And it made me laugh, but I also was like, it's a pretty true song. So I thought it was lyrically great. And so I reviewed that record and covered it and gave it a glowing review. And then from there, became friends with Joff. Played my 30th birthday party, the one that's on YouTube, where I get on stage and I'm dancing during Can't Turn a Whore into a Housewife.
Yeah,
just became friends with them, and
there's folks, if you've not yet seen this clip, it's one of my favorite moments on stage because
you were drumming.
I was drumming. There was one time when you and I shared the stage at the same time. Yeah.
Yep, that's right.
Yep, it was your birthday party and you were feeling really, really good. You had some dancing going on and you may have even stage dove. I don't remember that, but you could have maybe just fallen off the stage. I don't know.
No, at the end of the song, I think Joff and someone else just kind of like gently pushed me off the stage to the side.
That was called a cane. They just it was a good time, man. That's right. Larry said he was there that night too. I think that was the first time I met Larry Turing. So those guys I was a big fan of for a while because of the energy. The first time I met Joff, he's so infectious. You cannot meet Joff Metz and not fall in love with that dude right away.
Absolutely.
And as a sponsor of the show with 5-Star Guitars, it's not just that I have this connection to that shop and because of their support, but Joff has been somebody that has been such a champion for music in so many ways. He's gone to Washington D.C., gone to Congress, and he's lobbied for music education to make sure these schools, don't remove those arts as part of a major curriculum. Kids need music in their lives, and so kudos and hats off to Joff and that band. So when he befriended you that way, and you heard that song, then did you get behind them? Did you help support the record? And
I got behind him and gave it a great review, and then then we were good friends, and um, I just read Julie's comment. She probably does have a lot of incriminating photos of me.
yeah, I do too, but I was not going to bring them into the show. So
Fair enough, thank you.
yeah,
But yeah, I became friends with Joff, and then I got behind Worst Scenario. Obviously, had them play my birthday party. But I remember the first time Joff ever invited me to a party at his house. I can't remember if it was Joff or Aaron. But we started making up drinks, and one of the drinks, I would have to talk to Joff about this. It was either Joff and I or Aaron and I came up with pouring whiskey into barbecue sauce and drinking it and calling it a Burt Reynolds.
oh, oh my god,
Because we thought it would taste like Burt Reynolds' mustache.
oh god, that you know for me, there's a really good reason, and I will say a lot of it had to do with experiences I had with Joff. That it's a reason that I'm sober now, because times like that, it made more sense to make silly, fun things happen.
Yes.
The NAM show ruined me one year. My bar tab was ridiculous, and I was afraid, since they spilled so much booze on the bar, that I was afraid of wasting all that. So I ended up snorting it up, and so it was like pre-COVID, but I think I had COVID-like symptoms in my nasal passages for weeks. So
I can imagine. I had a good time down there with Joff too. I went down with MRC.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
Metz Ryan Collins, another amazing project that Joff Metz and Dean Ryan and Mike Collins has.
Yep.
Have you worked with them as well?
I have, yeah.
Okay.
And Joff just sent me the new record, and we're supposed to get together sometime and make a plan to get the record out. And yeah, I'll be working with them in some capacity, whether I'm managing them, doing publicity, or something. But we're definitely working together. Yeah.
Have you developed a role where you can actually wear all those hats in one capacity for a band?
Absolutely. As a manager, right, you do whatever you need to do for a band. You do publicity, you do booking, you do whatever you need to do. If we have a budget and we can farm it out, and I think that's the wise thing to do, I would recommend that. If I can get a booking agent, we'll bring a booking agent on board. But absolutely, as a manager, you have to wear every hat, especially in this day and age.
Sure.
When labels, we were talking about bands' need for labels, and definitely a band needed a label more in the late 90s than they do now, because now with the internet, you can get worldwide distribution through iTunes and Amazon, and then sell off your website, and you have access to a lot more people. Back in the day, it wasn't that widespread, so you still needed to be able to market at places like Music Millennium, window displays, listening stations, get your posters up there, get them to nicely display your album. So labels, even like a one-man operation like in Music We Trust back then, had a lot more need, I would say, than today. When I always tell bands, because you still come across bands that want or need a label.
Yeah.
And basically, like, look, if you're going to buy a house and you have all the money in cash, you don't need a bank. So why go through a bank unless it's more advantageous investing-wise or whatever?
Okay.
But let's say you just have all the cash to buy a house, and the best investment is paying for that house outright. Then you should do that rather than go through a bank and get a mortgage, obviously. So I tell bands, like, if you have the money and the know-how or the time, like, put out your record yourself. Do it. Don't give a slice of the pie to someone else just because you want that mortgage on your record. Do it yourself. But if a label can offer you something that you can't, if they have access to a studio that you can't afford and you don't want to home record, or they have a big publicity machine or push that can help you, then look at that. But don't look at a label just because they can press up your record and then be done with it if you have the budget to do that. Look at a label as basically a bank. They're giving you a loan, they're giving you a mortgage on your record, and go from there.
That's fantastic to put in perspective. So I'm going to walk through a couple scenarios then that maybe some up and coming bands are going to have. I know for sure. I mean, I had a couple of guys that called me from LA yesterday. These guys are young kids, 21, 22, just moved to LA with a backpack, and that's all they've got. they, in their mind, they still see the Sunset Strip as an opportunity for them to get signed, a la Motley Crue, and they're gonna hop on international tours playing Sheds, as a brand new discovery. You and I both know those days have kind of sailed, right? So,
Absolutely.
say we're four 21-year-old kids. We've moved to Portland. We've seen bands like the Shins and the Decemberists, and bands like that take off. We know that we've written some songs. We've not yet gone to the studio. We don't have any connections with publicity. We've got a fairly, when I say fairly modest, we have a social media presence of a few thousand people that have supported us. What is our roadmap to be able to go to the next level where we can get at least out of the Portland visibility and maybe nationwide, international? What would your recommendations be?
Oh, I have a great recommendation for that because bands always ask me that. Bands come to me and they're like, "Look, we have day jobs, we have wives, we have kids, or whatever. We can't go out on these month-long tours. How do we build our band?" And I tell them, like, pick 6 to 8 markets within driving distance that you can play every couple of months, like Seattle, from Portland, Seattle, Boise, Olympia, Bellingham, Spokane, Eugene, Corvallis, maybe even San Francisco if you're up for a big drive. But pick 6 to 8 markets that you can repetitiously hit every couple months.
Okay.
And then just do that. I call it the I-5 corridor. I mean, 84 takes you to Boise and Salt Lake City, but I-5 corridor will take you, Seattle, Olympia. So just plot these markets. So, and say you have kids, wives, jobs, whatever. But you can 2 weekends out of the month, your band can tour. That's 4 shows. Pick 4 markets and play those 4 markets, and then pick 4 more markets next month. But then go back to those 4 markets and keep rotating those markets. Because bands tell me like, "Oh, we're doing really well in Portland right now, but we're not doing well in Seattle." And I'm like, "Well, how many times have you played Portland? 12. How many times have you played Seattle? Once." Your hometown, you have this luck where your friends and your family come out to your hometown at first.
Sure.
And then there's a point where you want your band to have not friends and family per se. I mean, you still want them there, of course, because you love them and you want them to support you. But you want to have more fans than friends and family. So hopefully your friends and family bring friends, whatever, and then other bands bring people, and you start building up your fan base, and so you have actual fans outweighing the friends and family at the shows. And so you build it up. It's way easier to do that in your hometown.
Sure.
So that's why you're like, "Oh yeah, you're doing way better in your hometown than you are in Seattle." But you've also played Portland 12 times and you played Seattle once. Take that same kind of plan to Seattle. Go to Seattle, play to 4 people in Seattle. Go back 2 months later, play to 8, and just kind of organically grow it that way. Short of, a good TV placement or a rave pitchfork review or some of these other, outliers that are great and they absolutely will help you. Because people are like, "Oh, well, this band did this." And you're like, "Yeah, great." So they're the exception, not the rule. So going just by the book of rules, repetitiously hit markets and build it up.
Okay.
And, keep trying to find like-minded bands that you feel your fans will connect with and their fans will connect with you. And then just keep hitting it up. And once you build up you've played these 4 markets or these 8 markets and you went from like 10 people to 20 people, now you have 50 people, then start expanding outwards and expand more. It's what I did with I Can Lick Any Son of a Bitch in the House.
Yeah, Mike Damron.
Yeah, so when I first met them, they were doing like Tuesday nights at Ash Street.
Okay.
And got them into Dante's.
I should tell you, I don't mean to interrupt you. For anybody watching outside the Portland market, the clubs that Alex is talking about, and we'll just talk about the capacity. So Ash Street is probably a 400 seater. I'm thinking it's about a 400 seat capacity venue. And 2 things, actually, I want to jump back just a second too, because you talked about finding like-minded bands that have a similar demographic. If you wanted to get into the Seattle market and you didn't have any contacts or venues, how difficult is it to go and say, "Hey, we're doing all right in Portland. We want to get up in your club." And the venue says, "Well, how many people can you bring to our show in Seattle?" Right? Which is a common question. They want to know, are you going to sell tickets?
Absolutely.
We want a Saturday night in Seattle. We've only played Seattle once. We want a Saturday night at one of your prominent venues. We might be able to bring in, well, if they lie and they say we can bring in 100 people, then maybe the venue might take a risk, but chances are they might bring 10 people, right? So yeah, we can bring 10 people. You talked about like-minded bands. Is your recommendation then to connect with the bands first and say, hey, we would love to open your show that Saturday night at the Crocodile?
Absolutely. And I mean, absolutely. If you have you ever read The Secret, or are you familiar with The Secret?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so a local blues musician slash hairstylist, Ward Stroud, kind of changed my life when I got let go from CD Baby. He basically he was working at this high end salon down on 23rd, and he wanted me to come in for a haircut. It was like $75 a haircut. And I'm like, dude, I just got fucking let go.
Right.
I can spend $75 on a haircut.
Magnum opus. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, and yeah, this was back in 2007. So
Okay.
now it's what, I don't even know
Yeah.
how you change that price. But he was like, hey man, I'll come down, I'll give you a free haircut, but you got to do one favor for me. I'm like, what? He's like, I'll tell you after the haircut. I'm like, I don't know if I like that. He's just do it.
Yeah.
I went down, and basically he was like, go home and watch The Secret. And so I did. And in The Secret, one of the key takeaways from that, at least for me, was, you know, call the destination. If you want to get somewhere, if you want to go somewhere, call the destination. Find out how they got there. If you want to travel to New York in the dark, you only have to see 10 feet in front of you. With your headlights, you only have to see 10 feet in front of you. As long as you can only see 10 feet in front of you, you can make that next step. But if you want to get to New York, call them, ask how they got there, and then go on your way. So absolutely, go look at the clubs you want to play. See who's playing there. Check out the bands. Listen to them. If you think they fit with you, you know, hit them up. Invite them down for a Portland show. Reciprocate that. Show them a good Portland show, and then be like, hey, can we get a Seattle show with you?
Yeah.
That will do wonders. Goes back to networking.
Sure.
I've talked to a lot of people like, oh, you know, in my 20s, we seem to get a lot better shows than I do in my 40s. And I'm like, okay, well, what new band? What are you doing networking? Well, when I was 23, I went out every night, and I went to bars, and every new band I checked out, and I talked to them and bought them a drink, and we got gigs. Now I'm 45, I don't leave my house, and I sit at home, and we can't get gigs. And I'm like, oh, yeah, because you're not networking. I mean, you just answered your own question. So absolutely, not even like, I mean, obviously look at feature club listings and be like, oh, we'd fit with this show, and try to get on that show. But go look at bands that have played that club prior, and then hit them up. Tell them you like their music, send them your music, and then offer them something first. So you're not just out there going like, yo, give me something. Tell them like, hey, come play we can give you a good show in Portland. And then network that way. Are you still there? Kevin, are you still there?
Your market a little bit.
Huh?
Oh yeah, it was a little free. Yeah, can you see me?
Okay, now I see. Okay. Yeah, okay. Can you hear me?
Lost you for. Yeah, there was a little hiccup there. Apologize. You were talking about the dovetailing and introducing. You talked about bringing bands in, doing the reciprocation thing. Really, really important. So once you get into those markets, right, you've expanded things a little bit. You've gotten up to 50 or so people, you know, in a different market. They were, let's see, there was something you mentioned about what the bands were looking for, because I'm curious about, aside from developing a bigger fan base to go to see these shows, how about merchandise and marketing? Like when they're so we went up, we did the show, we expanded our market to 100 people that we were playing to in Seattle. We didn't have any merch, you know. So what, in terms of promotion at a show, what should a band be bringing in that can help market their band? Should it be CDs, T-shirts, you know, download discs, or what would you recommend for ways? I mean, obviously mixing it up. Oh, hello, pup. Having something be different to stand out is important. But I'd like to know, if you're managing a band and they get a couple of these gigs in Seattle, what do you tell them to take with them to extend the marketing?
Absolutely, T-shirts and stickers.
Okay.
I mean, it's free marketing for you. People give away stickers if you can, and then sell T-shirts. People are buying T-shirts, so you're making money. They're buying T-shirts and then they're wearing it. That's just free marketing. And you give away stickers. People stick them on places. Free marketing.
Okay.
you know your sticker's going to end up in some bathroom somewhere or
Right.
some street sign. Free marketing.
Yeah, okay. All right. Now, we get to the next point, right? Bands, they are reading in the zines about streaming royalties, right? So they've got a few albums out. They recognize that nobody's buying CDs anymore, right? They're individual downloads if they've gone through an online version of, distribution like CD Baby, where you could get a portion of that 99 cents per download. If a majority of revenue is being made now from bands that are their music is streamable, what do you tell them about revenue in terms of like their expectations? Like how much money should a band be expected to make in the various forms of distribution, whether it be streaming, hard copies, and the like?
I mean, that's a hard one to answer. I mean, that's like going back in the day and being like, okay, I'm putting out a record. How much money should I expect to make off putting out a record? And you're like, 0, a million? I don't know. Like it's so many variables on
Sure.
what to expect. Obviously, if you're having 100,000 monthly listeners on your Spotify, you're going to be making more than a guy that has 1,000. So I don't know. It's a hard one to answer on what to expect. I like to curb people's expectations by basically being like, expect the worst,
Yeah.
and go from there. Yeah, musicians complain, streaming royalties, you can do the math and put the numbers down on paper and it just looks awful.
Hmm.
And that's true. It's not pretty on streaming royalties, but I would also tell bands on their merch to bring their music to sell, whether it's a CD or vinyl.
Hmm.
It's actually 2021 was the first year that CD sales were up in a long time.
Yeah. Interesting. Uh,
Yeah.
so maybe rather than expectations, like of a band, rather than a band saying, what should we expect to make from streaming? How should we use our time? How should we balance our time and energy to focus on selling and marketing? Should we put more investment in hard sale ticket, hard sale items like vinyl has obviously become a new trend. Vinyl's really expensive, but for collectors, if people are really into a band, they're willing to shell out money for the vinyl. So having options, right, where you've got a download card that goes with the vinyl, and maybe that's it serves two purposes. Um, Versus there are even bands right now that are going back to release cassettes I've seen, which
Yep.
is an interesting thing. um, if there are a million people downloading your streams and you're not getting much revenue there, but that's still a million ears, right, or 2 million ears that are listening to your music. uh, is there a way to kind of share that time investment where we see, okay, there are a lot of people listening to our stuff but they're just not buying it, right? So balancing touring, selling merch on the road.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you're getting like a substantial amount of listeners, try to mine that data from where it is, and then try to drive them back to your website or your Facebook or Instagram, where you can then like collect that data, and then hit the road and make your money from live shows. I mean, hard. The last couple of years with the pandemic and everything.
What
So
pandemic? I'm
a lot of
kidding.
bands did the live streaming online and either asking for donations or charging tickets for that. I've had clients do well on both.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Hey,
yeah.
you know what? That's a really good point. Let me take 30 seconds really quick and just let people know. Alex has a good point. A lot of this DIY type stuff, independent artists that are out there, this show is in fact a DIY show for sure. While I've got some great sponsors that help me in terms of promoting products, if you wanted to support this show, help me get the production quality up, and maybe so I can fly Alex into a studio so we can have a real legit thing. You can go to this graphic right here and scan it. If you've got Venmo and you want to donate any contributions at all, you can go to @KevyMetal. You can scan that QR code right there and drop me a buck or two. You can also go to the YouTube channel that has on this caption right here. If you go there, you'll see that there are membership options. It's free to watch every single one of these episodes, and I would never charge you for that. But if you do become a member, there are some shows that I'm actually making exclusive to members only. I just had the episode where I interviewed Corey Glover poolside when we were down in Cancun a month or so ago. And there'll be other episodes like that when I'm back on tour where we're backstage and we'll be hanging with some folks that are just going to be exclusive to members. So if you go to the YouTube channel, you'll see some membership options. I would love to have your support. It means everything to me just to be able to extend the life and the production of the show. So sorry for that selfish plug right there, but I had to say that the
No,
DIY thing, it's important, right? So right now, there's been a weird influx of opportunities where bands could kind of get back into some semblance of normalcy, where the venues opened up. Depending on the COVID protocols at any given time, we've had opportunities where bands can play live. Who knows what we have in store for this next year? Where have you seen some successes? You talked about bands that have done some live streams and they've had advertisements for their PayPal links or Venmo or anything like that. Maybe give me some examples of bands that you've worked with where you felt like, all right, these guys got it. You know, the venues, they saw what was in their control. So venues that closed down, it wasn't an option to play these live shows. Rather than taking a hiatus for a year or two where you lose your fan base, what could a band do now? Say the pandemic shuts everything down again for the next 12 months. What can a band do to try and keep things going?
Hit social media, really interact with your fans, update your social media, have that interaction. Having new stuff to put out, so your fans are always checking your social media and always kind of being on the tip of their tongue, so to say. So they're always like wondering what you're doing, and always checking up on you. So be active and have, you know, new stuff, even if it's like behind the scenes photos of you guys working on a new record, or band still practicing, or just what you guys do in your everyday life, to kind of connect with the fans. But then also do some live streams. Get a setup where you or find a way you can do a setup and live stream some shows, and either ask for fan donations or go through a company that charges a ticket fee, and then we'll give you a link to go to the live feed.
Okay, that's good stuff. You know, one of the questions that I get from bands now, should we have a management? Should we use management? When you talked about using social media, there maybe are, you know, everybody out there has an Instagram account or a Facebook account, or they're using Twitch to talk to their fans. But say they're not web savvy, or they don't have the time. They're all delivering pizzas and they don't have time to manage social media. Is hiring a publicist, someone that can manage those social media things, a good idea?
I mean, a publicist is going to work to the media. You want to hire someone else, like a social media person, to do your social media. But I recommend against that,
Okay.
unless they're not doing it. They're assisting you with it to try to maximize ways to. They know the algorithms, and they can maximize the platform to get you the highest reach, to reach your fans and your band's fans. I've taken a few online courses myself on how to maximize everything and how to get a better reach through the algorithms, but you really got to stay on top of it, because it seems Facebook and Instagram are always constantly changing their algorithms. So, I mean, I know bands that will post on Facebook, and people are like, oh, I never saw that, and, you know, I liked your page, and it reaches like 10% of their followers that have followed the page.
Right.
So if you want to hire someone to help you learn the back end of it and to maximize it, absolutely. But I don't advise hiring someone to actually run it for you, because you want that personal content up there. You want that personal connection. Sure. You don't want someone else running it, unless you have someone that's like, here, I need this, and this, give me this, to give that personal connection. And if they're doing that and you don't have the time for it, then absolutely. Okay. Again, it boils down to what can you do and what can't you do. And if you can do it, do it. It's going to help you in all aspects of the business. If you can jump in and do something and you know it, it's going to help you better connect with your management if you get management down the line. Because I get bands that come to me all the time. They're like, we think we need a manager. And I'm like, why do you think that? And then they talk to you and you're like, nah, I don't think you need management. You need to, well, because we can't get shows. Well, then hustle and try to get shows. Like, if you can't get shows and a manager comes on, in the end, it's going to be less advantageous for you because they're going to be doing it all and you still don't know how to do it, how to get those shows. But if you can get those shows and build something, and then they can build beyond that for you, that's better for both of you. That way you can connect with the manager and go, okay, the manager's doing this and it's not working. I get it because I've been there, I've done that. Or like, okay, let's try this. It just helps you better connect with the person if you've done it yourself and learned it. Much like if you're running a restaurant and you're in a restaurant and you don't know how to cook or run the register, but you're the owner. And you're like, oh, I hired all these employees to run my restaurant, but I don't know how to do it. It's not going to be advantageous to you at all.
That's a good analogy. In that analogy, I'm thinking, okay, so say I have a fantastic, cordon bleu chef. I've got, I feel like a wonderful menu and I have a lot to offer. I'm in the Portland area where there's a lot of restaurant competition. How do I get my word out there that all these other people in the Portland area, the million plus people in the surrounding area, find out about my restaurant versus somebody else?
Absolutely. I call that the pissing in the ocean problem.
Okay.
Like when MySpace came on and everyone had a MySpace page and everyone's like, oh, I got my music on MySpace. I have a MySpace band page. Like, my band's going to get discovered because these 4 other bands got discovered because they had MySpace pages.
Right.
And I'm like, well, everyone else has a MySpace page now. So you're just pissing in the ocean.
Sure.
It's going to do, just having that's going to do nothing. You still got to find out how to reach the people. So, I mean, that's a really good question with social media. Go follow other bands that you think are in your wheelhouse. Like their posts. Hopefully they'll follow you back, like your posts, and then kind of follow their fans. Just kind of follow the trail. Call the destination. Find a band that you think you'd be a perfect fit with that has way more followers. Go and try to follow their followers. Go and like their posts. Hopefully they'll follow you back. Just kind of call the destination. Find out where someone else is and how you can get there.
Call the destination. I love that one. I think your dog is saying right now, your pup's saying, Dad, Alex, you've got all this wisdom. You're sharing all this wisdom, and this is maybe stuff that you shouldn't be giving away. But giving away the keys to the kingdom is one thing. I mean, for people, they could read these materials. Talking to you, I mean, you've done this for a long time, and you're really
Absolutely.
good at it. And you boil things down in a way that people can understand. It's palatable. Uh, and I don't think it's costing you any work because I think it's great from what I've seen and what I've heard about you is that you're only working with artists that you believe in.
Absolutely.
If the music does not resonate with you, it's not a band that you're going to be working with. Um, can you tell me about some bands? You don't have to mention names, but tell me about a band that maybe you started working with and you realized they just don't get it. It's not worth my time.
Well, I have a good story. So who knows when, 2007, 2006, 2008, around that time. No, it would have been, sorry, probably 2004, 2005. I reviewed 30 Odd Foot of Grunts for A Music We Trust,
Okay.
which is Russell Crowe's band.
Oh, right.
And everyone just dogging on it because it was Russell Crowe.
Right.
And my review was kind of like, look, I don't want to give this guy a fair shake either. He's an actor, shouldn't be a musician. Like,
Yeah.
everyone's coming out, this is bad. But my review was basically like, but if you listen to the record and actually give it an honest listen and you don't come out with any preconceived notions or, just come into it knowing you're going to hate it, it's not bad for what it is. It's not the best, it's not the greatest, but it's strong. It's got some good songs, it's got some weak songs. And, he may be an average songwriter, but he's got some good songs and some good points. And this just isn't trash because it's Russell Crowe.
Nice.
So Russell Crowe obviously would leave the band to go do movies. So his backing band had another band. And their manager contacted me and was like, we want to hire you to do press for this band's U.S. tour. It's 30 Odd Foot of Grunts without Russell Crowe.
Okay.
And I heard the record and I was like, yeah, I don't know. I don't really like it. And they're like, well, you like 30 Odd Foot of Grunts. And I'm like, I think 30 Odd Foot of Grunts is better than this. Like, I think Russell Crowe is a better songwriter than the guy writing these songs. Like, I just do. Sorry. Yeah. And they were like, come on. Like, we really like your honesty and everything. Like, we want you to work with us. Please work with us. And, I really liked the manager. She was sweet. And so I gave it a try. And then I learned, like, wow. Like, journalists would be like, wow, okay, so this is Russell Crowe's backing band. And they came in with preconceived notions and they wanted to hate on it.
Sure.
And they asked me, what do you think? And I'm like, I don't know. It's mediocre. And like, wow, you're trying to sell me this record that you think's mediocre?
Yeah. Right.
And I'm like, yeah, it's my job. I'm trying to sell it to you, but I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to, like polish a turd and tell you it's great. Like, I think it's mediocre, and I always told people this. I said, yeah, maybe I think it's mediocre. But it's got some good points. I can tell you the good points. And it's got some low points to it, but that's all subjective. You could play me your 10 favorite records. I can be like, really? You like that record? That's like, I never got Rush and I do not like Rush, but as a drummer, you might love Rush. And you can be like, no, listen to this record. And I'd be like, I don't get it. In the same way, I played Replacements for friends and they're like, I don't get it. I don't get Replacements. And I'm like, dude, this, if you ever read the book, This Band Could Be Your Life, Replacements are in there. And I'm like, this band was my life. Like, this band kept me alive through high school. Like, I think Paul Westerberg's one of the greatest songwriters of all time. And people that don't get it, I'm like, okay, like, it's all subjective. Right. So I told the writers, like, yeah, I don't like it, but I'm working it. I'm trying to be honest. And they hired me for my honesty. So they know all my opinions.
Sure.
So I'm just being honest with you. Like, give it a listen. You might like it. And I had some people who were like, yeah, dude, I like it. I don't know why you diss on it so much. And I'm like, didn't diss on it, called it mediocre, didn't diss on it. It's my client. I'm not going to like diss on it. I'm just being honest to myself. And I've had people like when I worked Blind Pilot, after I got them on NPR and got them Last Call with Carson Daly. And I got them the iTunes single of the week. That's what launched it all. Got them the iTunes single of the week. Once I landed that for them.
Wow.
I had sent like 100 other bands to iTunes to get the single of the week. Never landed one. Finally got the Blind Pilot land. And then it rocketed them. They sold like 10,000 albums in a month because of it or something, or a week. Like, it was astronomical. It really launched them. People were like, my records as good as Blind Pilot are better. Here, we don't hire you. Give me the iTunes single of the week.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't work that way. Like, for whatever reason, this record resonated with the person. I'd sent him 100 records before that didn't resonate. This one resonated with him. He absolutely loves it. I love the record myself, obviously. But, let's say, I thought there was 12 better records that I sent that didn't get any attention. Whatever. It boils down to, I could put my 10 favorite records on the table. You can put your 10 favorite, and we can both be like, ooh, those 5? Yeah, I don't hear it at all. That's not good at all. And
sure.
Music is all subjective. That's what I love about music.
That is a beautiful thing. Man, I have so many questions for you. And again, I don't mean to turn this into an interview style. As people know that have watched this show, a lot of this is the intent is for the conversation to be like you and I are hanging backstage. This is authentically something that Alex and I would be hanging and talking about backstage, man, because there are a lot of these experiences that I've had in bands over time, independent bands, nationally signed bands. And I love this journey. I mentioned earlier that some kids called me from LA yesterday. They were old members of my son's band. They called me and said, we're scared. And I said, what are you scared of? And they said, we've only, we've been down here like a week, showed up in our backpack and with our backpack and a guitar. We're afraid that our expectations about success are not going to be realized. And I said, well, my opinion is that fear is a killer motivator. If you were to be my age, 51 now, and sitting at a desk somewhere wishing I had a safe job, right? And I was wishing that the drive and inspiration I had at 21 made me so badly want to get into the heart of the music business, but I just didn't take the risk. And now I'm working at an insurance company, and I let all those passionate dreams go beside myself, or go by the wayside. And all I have are woulda, coulda, shoulda things. And to me, that's what I'd be afraid of. I think being afraid of getting your ass kicked a few times, that's a good fear. And you're down there doing it. The fact that you made that effort is one thing. Now you got work to do, right? And so the scarier parts are knowing, okay, we're passionate about music. We know we want to play. Our interest is having worldwide success. They're saying, the 1975 is our favorite band. We want to get out here. We want to play these shows like the 1975. You talked about the destination, like going to the destination and really like looking at what journey did they take? Sometimes there's a band that will take off that Somebody heard about them early on, and they didn't have to pay a whole lot of dues. They just got a leg up. But that is few and far between the case, right? A lot of bands have done thousands and thousands of shows for no money on Tuesday nights at crappy little clubs in a van, and there's something so substantial about that experience because it does build some wisdom, right? Now,
Really.
I'm not in the position that you are, right, where I've managed bands and I just observe. I like the stories. I think it's interesting to me. What's a band that you've seen that's out there, a national act like that? You think, man, I don't see the substance. I have no idea how they got the success that they've had, and I'm maybe thinking the last 10, 15 years. That's just a curious observation, and really it's your perspective, and again, subjective.
Last 10, 15 years. Uh, so that would put us what at like mid 2000s. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, man, that's a really hard one. I don't know. I mean, there's tons of bands on the radio. I'm like, huh, I don't hear it. I mean, it's catchy, but
Yeah.
it's vapid to me. It's got no substance to it. So I don't get it. But yeah, I don't know. It's a really tough one. Do you have one off the top of your head?
Um, well, there were some that I was a huge, and you'll laugh about this because music was second. Music was first. Melodies and hooks were the thing that I listened to. Lyrics were secondary. I was such a butt rock fan, and I grew up in the '80s, man. Right, so I was so into vapid, superficial hard rock. Right, the melody bands. And when I go back now and I think about all the time that I listened to Helix and and Motley and all those bands, and I think, wow, it's tough to go to see these shows and think that that had such an impact on my life. They're fun, I mean, I play in a band that, the depth of lyrics with a flock of seagulls is probably not Shakespeare, right? But it had such an impact, and the way that it made people feel is the thing that I really like about it. Because when people come out to our shows, they can put all of the angst in their life aside, and they can just really escape for a couple of hours and go back to when they were 15 and they were making out with their first girlfriend. And so I like that the music we play makes people feel really good. That's a good thing. Um,
Absolutely.
but I'm embarrassed, because okay, I will tie it into the question I always ask guests at the end of my show is, I'd love to know, people that think they know Alex Steininger, what's a guilty pleasure of yours? What would they be surprised to find out about you?
Huh, that's a good one. In the mid 2000s, I had a friend come over to my house, and he like would only listen to whatever was on Pitchfork. Like if Pitchfork recommended, he'd listen to it. If Pitchfork didn't, he just couldn't listen to it because he was way too cool.
Okay.
And he came to my house, and there was a stack of CDs sitting down, and he's like, "Dude, you're still listening to Sponge and Goldfinger?" I was like, "Yeah, why wouldn't I?" He's like, "Dude, you're in your 20s now, man. That's like high school shit, dude. You got to grow out of that, man. Here, check out the new Spoon record." And I was like, "Yeah, I like Spoon too, man. But fucking, you know, we're getting older. We shouldn't have what mashed potatoes and macaroni and cheese anymore because we had that fucking as kids.
Right.
Goldfinger and Sponge are comfort music to me, but also like Sponge to this day, I think they're making better music than they were in the 90s. And if they were 20 and their current records were flip flopped, they would have been bigger than they were. Like I think Vinny from Sponge is writing better songs now in his 50s than he was writing in his 20s.
Sure. Wisdom helped.
Yeah. What do they say? Youth is, or yeah, they say youth is wasted, or it's I don't know, I can't remember. It's like youth is wasted on the young or something. Yeah, I think that's the saying. But I don't know. There's like a lot of stuff that I'll still listen to. I mean, I still will listen to my Cherry Pop and Daddy's records.
Nice. Yeah.
And friends like, oh, you're still listening to that? Really? And I'm like, yeah, it reminds me of a time, reminds me of a place.
Yeah.
Coming from Portland, I mean, a lot of people would be surprised. I'll still put on the first two Everclear records still. Grew up on them, lyrically connected with them, loved them,
You
had
know,
my disagreements and fights with Art.
yeah.
Uh,
You're
feel like
not.
I'm fences with him, but I still connect with those records. No matter how I age, I'm still going to connect with a part of me, back then and always remember that person. So yeah, I mean, there's some stuff that I'll listen to, and then like fucking Taylor Swift's new record was really great.
Oh yeah.
I give Tay Tay props, man. And I listen to that, and my friends are just like, "Oh my god, dude, you're in your 40s."
Right. Yeah. That's those are the guys that wear the hipster hats that make Portland, a little less cool, to be honest with me. Just be authentic about things that are interesting to you. You mentioned Everclear. That was one of the bands, and I remember when we used to do interviews with Analama, and the band was really starting to get some recognition. NRK interviewed the band. We were in the studio, and I remember them going around and asking about local bands that were taking off at that time and whether or not we were influenced or inspired by it. Bands like the Dandy Warhols, Brian Jonestown Massacre was, happened at the same time with Dandy's. Everclear, of course. And I remember our guitarist, to my dismay, was just like, man, it's a band that can just keep releasing the same single over and over and over again. It's selling millions of records. And when he said it, to me, what made me feel, it made me feel like it was so petty that he was envious, right? I mean,
Yeah,
Everclear was laughing all the way to the bank, right? I mean, they like, okay, well, we could care less what you think about our singles, whether or not they're derivative of the first single we released. But the adage of if you can't say something nice about somebody in the press, then don't say anything at all. It's one thing if you're a critic, right? If you're, you're reviewing an album, people want authenticity. They want
absolutely.
to be, but for me, if they compare you or they ask you about another band, you know, man, unless you have a personal beef, and that doesn't even need to be aired. I think it's just professionalism. But the I'm excited about bands that are underground. There are bands locally that I feel like some of my favorite Portland bands. I want to see them blow up, and at the same time, I kind of feel like they might like having a local community feel, and just they're almost like they have an aversion to wanting to go out and blow up, like Tango Alpha Tango, one of my favorite bands in the area, right? They've been doing well locally. They went off and did Sasquatch and did some touring with some national artists, and then they come back home and they have a rabid fan base back home, and I think it feels really good to be able to come back and see that and know that they're going to be supported very well in the region. But it's Mayfield Four was my favorite all-time band from Spokane. Saw them
Yeah,
in Seattle back in the mid
there's
'90s.
Miles Kennedy, right?
Kennedy, and I remember when they got signed, I was really it was a mixed blessing because they were my favorite band, best songs. The guy had the most ridiculously killer voice, and we did a lot of shows with them at that point, and so I felt like there was a connection, that we had where, oh wow, they're our little band that nobody's going to know about. They got signed, they went off and they toured with Everclear and some of those other bands, and things didn't go as far as they wanted it to. Now Miles is doing just fine, right? He's got a killer solo career. He's playing with Alter Bridge. He's playing with Slash. He's
Yep.
got three full-time careers, and the world has figured out that the dude is one of the greatest singers on the planet. It's awesome, and at the same time, the protector inside of me thinks, "Gosh, remember when nobody knew who Miles Kennedy was, and how excited I was that I was inside, I had the inside scoop." So, do you have any inside scoops on artists like that you think, all right, this is one that easily could break and be huge, but for now,
I mean, I have management clients that I 100% believe in that. I'd be biased because I have a stake in it, but I manage this female singer songwriter, Wonder Truly, out of Phoenix.
okay,
Um, that's writing amazing stuff and working on a new record that I think has a lot of potential. Put a lot of
wonderful.
weight on my shoulders to shop it around and get some momentum behind it. But Casey Neal's new record is sounding amazing. Casey Anderson has a new record. Managed both those Caseys that I think are phenomenal. That have potential to have legs.
Sure.
Uh, you know, um,
So, of those three, can I ask you,
yeah.
uh, what are you doing in terms of helping promote, manage, get them out in so more of an audience can see them?
Right now, I mean, Casey Neal is finishing up his record. Casey Anderson just finished his record, and I'm shopping it to labels right now. So my main focus right now is to find a label for Casey Anderson's new record. Casey Neal, once it's finally done, my main object will be to get a label for it. And same with Wonder. So all three artists right now, my main objective is to find a label for it. And if I can't find a label for it, then devise a plan to self-release and get it out there to get some press and get some traction for it so they can go tour in support of it, build some markets, and hopefully get us some legs to get some more interest down the line.
Okay.
And all three of them also heavily trying to get, TV placements for them and work on that, which would help us a lot in our quest to elevate things, but also put some coin in the bank where we might not need a label.
Okay. That was one thing I was going to ask you about before too. You mentioned placement. So licensing, right? It's a huge deal for artists that can get a song in TV, movies, video games, anything like that. Do you work with licensing with an artist so you can get their stuff out there?
Yeah, I mean, I shop it to people that do that and have their, thumbs in the pie. I have a few contacts for a few studio people. And mainly I work with people that are going to shop to music supervisors for us.
Okay.
So I'm always constantly pitching my clients' music to licensing people that are going to then shop them to music supervisors.
Okay. If Wonder Truly were you're shopping her for a label, say you get a bidding war, you got three labels that are interested in that artist. What does that look like to you? Is it a label that can actually get some distribution out there so that the music can be in all sorts of different channels? Is it that there's tour support behind it? Is there support for financial backing for the label for a record that's recoupable? What should a band like Wonder Truly expect from a label?
So for Wonder, she does music full time. So you got to take into account she's got a lot of regular gigs she does right now.
Okay.
That pay rent, pay for her food. So I got to take that into account. To put her on the road, I would need a label for her that could do tour support, that could give her money so her bills can be paid at home, and she can go out there and road dog it and be able to build things without worrying about the door take, without worrying about guarantees. So then we could actually hit it hard and focus on other things like connecting with bands in different markets and building it.
Okay.
Whereas other artists where you don't have to necessarily, they can work remotely with their laptop, and so they're working while they're touring, so their bills are already going to be paid. It's a different thing. I'd want a label that could pump a lot of money into marketing and really handle marketing that we can't handle on our own. But in the case of Wonder, yeah, we need tour support, and we make sure bills are paid so she can go out there and do a national tour.
Okay. That's great that you've got those criteria. Do you have kind of a spreadsheet that you've put together where you can say, all right, these pieces are already covered, so we want to cover that angle if she ends up signing?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I sit down with each project and work on that. Yeah.
Okay. That, like I said, I mean, I really do feel like I'm asking you to give away some of the keys to the kingdom, but these are questions that so many artists ask me, and I'm not in the position that you're in, but I think so many new bands, they love to play music. They don't think about the business of music, and it would be incredible to have something like a curriculum in schools, high school, where if, beyond band class, if you really feel like music as a career is an option, then, all right, what's the next level? You recommend like graduating seniors take business classes and understand, especially online marketing?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Nathan Wetzel's asking, "Hey, you want to meet up in Corbett?" You're getting meetup requests here in the chat. I think that's funny.
That's my friend. That's my friend Nathan, and he's making a joke.
Okay.
Not a big fan of the town or city of Corbett.
Oh, well, you know what? It was the first town that I visited in the gorge on the way here from Montana, middle of January, about this time in 1993, 40 below when I left Bozeman, Montana. I got to Corbett at about midnight. It was 60 degrees, and I decided I am done with Montana. I have found that my new home in Portland, so I didn't even have to get to Portland. I already knew. So Corbett was a good thing for me. But
Nice.
but I don't.
I like the Corbett General Store.
Okay.
Beyond that, not a big fan. Had some bad experiences.
Oh, let's share a little bad experience from Corbett. You wanna?
No, I do not.
Okay. Yeah, man, we covered a ton of professionalism in this, and I think you and I both know there are fun stories that we could share offline about the music business, but
Absolutely.
and you gave away some really, really great info. Guys, if you're out there, if you're musicians, if you're out there and you wanted to learn a little bit about what it takes to do this for a living, I would say hit inmusicwetrust.com, find Alex Steininger. This dude, he might look like he's 19, but this guy's got a whole lifetime of experience in this business. He knows everything from labels to management and publicity and PR, and he can put you in the right direction. So I encourage you to do that. I have one last thing that I like to do on this show, and I don't do it on every show, but I've been trying to lately. So
Okay.
whether you believe in it or not, I have a fortune cookie for you.
Okay.
I
I
have
love
not
it.
yet, but these are the Lucky Boy fortune cookies. It looks like. So we'll see if that actually is a true thing, and you're going to be a lucky boy.
I look forward to it.
You can choose to add in bed if you want at the end of this phrase, but all right, folks, drum roll. Hey, you know what? Before I do this, I should tell you, if you got here late, folks, and I know a few of you did, Renee Roman, it's nice to see you. She'll be here on the Portland Cello Project interview next week. Go back to the beginning of this. Take some notes. We had some personal hanging conversation, but there's a huge amount of very detailed information about the way this music business works and good tips. So go back to the beginning. You can also go in about 8 minutes. You'll be able to go to www.accesskevin.com. You'll see this interview up there in its entirety, and I'll put a link to Alex's site as well. So no further ado, we've got Alex's fortune cookie. Here we go. I think you just showed me right there behind you. Today's a good day for being with a companion. And look who's right there sniffing at your elbow. And what's your pup's name?
Her name's Nico.
Nico. Oh, what a sweet dog. Oh, she's got a toy for you too. Is that a fish?
It's like a rabbit
Okay. Yeah.
animal. It's her favorite toy.
When every time we walk in the door, my Edgar Allan Pug, he'll run over and he'll either get a snake, a massive shark that he decides that he needs to show his dominance by mounting it, or a little tiny bear. So maybe Nico and Edgar need to meet in a dog park sometime.
I would love that. You've been at 1,000 Acres out in Troutdale?
Love it. Yeah, absolutely. You walk
Okay.
all the way down to the river out there. Yeah,
Yep.
it's gorgeous.
Yep. She loves it there.
Okay, we'll go out and do it.
I'd love that.
Alex Steininger, thank you so much, man. It's really, really a pleasure. I am a huge fan of everything you've done in this community. You've supported so many bands. Folks, the thing you need to do, and we talked about it earlier, is go to YouTube, search Whores and Housewives Western Aerial, and you will see Alex and his glory celebrating a birthday on stage with us at the Doug Fir. So with that, I got to say thank you guys so much, all of you, for being here. Can't wait to see you guys next week with Portland Cello Project and Rob and Mark from Floater and Igniter podcast. We're just continuing the local heroes for the January episodes. And again, Alex Steininger, man, thank you so much. Happy New Year to you. One thing we didn't get into, and maybe you can touch on that in maybe one of your next returns, are NFTs for music artists. And cryptocurrency is a big way that transactions are going these days. So if NFTs are on your radar and you want to talk about it sometime, I'm going to bring some cryptocurrency pros on the show, and maybe we can talk about that.
Nice.
Awesome. All right, you guys.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, buddy. I'll talk to you later.